Hi, I'm Dr. Kyla, paediatric dietitian, fussy eating specialist, and mum of two. I'm the founder of the online Mealtimes memberships that help parents just like you experience a confident and guilt-free way of feeding children. I'm also a business owner, a hot cross bun lover, and my superpower is finding things that you cannot live without. In this podcast, I'm talking about feeding your family, along with a random selection of topics that tickle my fancy. Welcome to Mealtimes with Dr. Kyla.
All right, welcome to today's podcast episode. Today's guest is Rebecca Little, owner of the online store Little Miss Period, where I bought my reusable menstrual disc. Now, menstrual product discussions aren't typical for a podcast from a dietitian, but as you get to know me, you'll understand that when I love something, I cannot stop talking about it, and I cannot stop talking about the disc. I'd say I get a message about the disc at least every day on Instagram. It's been that popular and it's not even my product. So let's rewind a second. Beck, do you want to introduce yourself first and then maybe you can introduce the disc?
Of course. I'm Rebecca, the founder of Little Miss Period, and I am a mum of three beautiful girls. I live in a small country town in Gippsland in Victoria. It's very cold here, unlike most of your audience in Perth. I started Little Miss Period probably, I would say, 4 years ago, with the year that went into planning everything, and we officially launched 3 years ago. So my main inspiration behind it was knowing that I have three girls who I am raising, and I wanted period chat to be a normal thing, a topic at the dinner table. Nothing would be off limits, raising my girls
I
with
love that.
kids.
It's quite different to how we were raised, though, isn't it? Like it still feels, even when I talk
Absolutely.
about it and when I have thought about first talking about the disc on Instagram, I was like, oh, this feels like too much information.
Yeah, I think
But
so. I'm very grateful that my husband hasn't even batted an eyelid about talking about periods. I remember when we first got together, he was the one going to grab some pads and tampons for me from the supermarket. And there was, yeah, I just loved that he was so open to embracing what we experience every month.
yeah, I reckon, I mean, this is on topic, but a little bit distracted. I think it's something we're all talking about a lot more. Like
Yeah,
I am reading books about the moon and my cycle, and I'm tracking my cycle properly for the first time, and I'm almost 40. Like that's wild.
exactly. Like I think growing up, seeing my mum in the toilet and she'd quickly shut the door, and it was a forbidden territory. Like we weren't supposed to know about anything. And even when I did get my period for the first time, mum put a packet of tampons on my bed, and I was like, what the hell am I going to be doing with these? And it was my 12th birthday party. It was a pool party. I ended up folding a bit of toilet paper and sitting on the edge of the pool. And I guess that's an experience that I don't want for my girls. I don't want for their friends. And I hope that we can reach a larger audience so that periods are a positive and a normal thing in our everyday lives.
Absolutely. And if we talk about it more, then you know a bit more about what to expect, right? I think even the messages
Exactly.
that I get on Instagram are like, this feels weird, but like, would this work for me? I don't know. I
Yeah,
feel
yeah.
uncomfortable talking about it. I've never discussed the options with anyone else. And I mean, it's hard to bring up sometimes, isn't it?
It is. Oh, well, not in my household anymore because
Yes.
my girls, the toilet door is always open and they come bursting in, and they know everything, from period cups and discs and period underwear and pads. They're certainly across it all, and nothing seems to scare them anymore. So
That's super cool. I mean, it's definitely still a work in progress in my house. I think I'm still undoing some of the things that like I've subconsciously learned about periods and
yeah,
you know,
definitely.
life, but I feel like, a little bit often is the key, right? You don't have to go into big discussions or deep demonstrations straight away,
And
but that
always like
regular
age
small bits.
appropriate. Like
Yeah,
the twins are 5 and my eldest is 9 turning 10. So I'm guessing, we're going to enter that new chapter relatively soon. And yeah, always age appropriate.
so cool. All right, so talk to me about the disc. How would you explain the disc to
Oh,
somebody who
the
has no
disc.
idea of what it is?
So this disc comes in sea fog and also the black one. This is mine, which I've taken out of the silicone case. I have cut my tab off there, which I'll explain later, but this disc is truly a game changer. Yeah, so it will hold up to 50 mils of blood. So that is 5 tampons worth of menstrual blood, which is mind-blowing. Uh, my first time that I tried it, I was a little bit nervous, so I kept emptying it every 2 hours or 3 hours. And now I've gotten to the stage where I don't have to change the disc for about 8 to 12 hours. I am still quite a heavy bleeder, but this seems to hold it all in.
Wild, isn't it? So it's basically like if you're listening along and this is in your ears, it's like it's not a cup, it is literally like a frisbee with a kind of dent on the bottom of it, isn't it? But it's small enough to
Yeah.
insert.
A lot of people can be quite intimidated by the size of it because, as you said, it's a round disc, but it can be folded up and almost the size of a tampon. So, in terms of size, when you look at it, it does look very intimidating. But once you move past that and it's can be
Yeah,
squeezed together into the size of a tampon, yeah, you kind of forget about all of
you
that.
sure do. And
Yeah.
practice makes perfect. It's interesting because I feel like I probably only jumped on the reusable menstrual product bandwagon maybe like 4 years ago. So relatively new. I started with the undies.
Mhm.
Started with Modi Body. I moved to Booty. And I still think the knickers are so great for so
Oh, they're
many
so handy,
reasons,
especially
right?
for a day at home. If you know you're going, I don't know, if you're doing exercise or something, running around with the children, it's nice to have that protective layer there. I have been going solo with the disc now, and I
You're
have
doing wild
worn.
and free.
I know it's quite liberating not to have anything on down there, especially when I'm going swimming. I love that I can swim with the disc in and it's not going to be like a saggy tampon by the end of my swimming day out with
Yeah.
the kids.
I mean, I love the simpleness of the period undies, but I just find them such a faff. Like if you are a heavy bleeder, and I am, I feel like I'm constantly rinsing, washing, trying to dry these like fairly solid knickers. They have to be
Yeah.
pretty
The
solid to
plastic
absorb.
hung up on the line as well. Because the
Absolutely.
technology in them won't cope with a dryer, which
Yeah. And
is
so
very unfortunate here down in Victoria.
well, this is what started it actually. So I was big into the period knickers, and then we were on holiday in Melbourne, and I was like, what do I do? Because I don't actually want to take like 8 pairs of knickers with me to just to manage the first couple of days if I'm like not sure how much I'm going to bleed or how easily I'm going to be able to access a washing machine or how I'm even going to dry these bad boys,
Exactly.
at some point. And so I actually moved to first the cup. So the cup is slightly different. What's the difference between a menstrual cup and a disc?
So the cup requires suction. You'll see a lot of demonstration videos. We stock a Hello Cup, which is a preference for some people. I definitely did the same train as you. I was on the period underwear, the reusable pads, and then I tried the cup. But I found that after a little of investigation with my gynecologist and physio that I actually have a low cervix. So the thing with the cups, which I'll just show you, we've got, this one is a large one. This one is a small one. I don't have the medium on me, but these are the low cervix options. So this comes in a size medium and a size large, which is also in a double box. And for those listening at home, it's kind of like a cone shape. I would describe it as a cone.
Like a gnome hat, almost upside down.
Yeah, and it doesn't have the toggle at the bottom, and the toggle often interferes when, I guess, just having it there.
Yeah. We totally understand what you mean. There's a little
Yeah.
stick that kind of pokes out the bottom of the cup and it can feel really uncomfortable. That was one of the biggest things that put me off the cup.
Yeah,
Personally.
so when you have a low cervix, the toggle is going to stick out more. And that is why some people, it doesn't work for them. The cup doesn't work for them because they're not taking
The
into
shape, it's not
account.
the correct fit for them. I
They're
mean, I
not
think
taking
even
into
having to
account their
decide,
cervix type. Yeah, and there are all different cervix types. We've got the low, the standard, and the high.
how do
Uh,
people know this?
there's a very intimate test that you can do with yourself, and it requires your hands. And yeah, it's just getting familiar with your own body and being able to work out the centimeters and how high your cervix actually is.
I mean, never a bad thing to know yourself more, but I personally have no idea about the where my cervix is, and that's one of the big reasons that put me off the cup. Like, was I going to have the right fit? Whereas the disc is more of a one size fits all, would you say?
It is. It's absolutely a one size fits all. It's for all cervix heights. And yeah, I truly think that this is the product
Yeah.
if you're unsure of your cervix height.
So let's talk about this disc. So, how would you explain inserting the disc to somebody who is brand new to it?
If this is your first time using the disc, it is recommended to try it with some lubricant, or you can try it in the shower, which I find probably the easiest way. And you would put lubricant on the rim that is going inside. You don't need a whole lot, and you kind of fold the sizes together like that to the size of a tampon. And if you can manage to hold it with two hands, you can slowly let it release, and then it will pop up and sit where it needs to sit.
Like we might need some video examples in the
Yeah,
podcast show notes.
there are plenty of video examples. Kim Roses, which is the co-designer of this with Hello Period, has a YouTube channel called Period Nirvana, and it is a wealth of knowledge. She has tried over 60 different period discs alone. Obviously, she's very biased when it comes to the Hello disc, but there's good reason to be biased because they've made it with, I think it's even better than what medical grade silicone is. It's thermoplastic. Oh, I know this. I've got it written down.
You can have a look while I explain how I do mine.
Thermoplastic elastomer, it is called. So hypoallergenic, BPA free, silicone, rubber, and latex free as well. So
That.
yeah.
So
Well, the only reason I mention that is because you will notice that as the reusable cup and disc option becomes available and more known about, more products seem to be popping up on the market. And we know that with more products that are out there, they aren't always the best for you or eco-friendly.
Yeah. And I guess that's kind of one of the big things for me, really, is the sustainable part of it, that I'm not contributing to landfill by, using tampons or pads or things that have to go in the bin somewhere like that, and not having a rip off that isn't a safe option.
It's crazy to think about how much tampons and pads we will go through each cycle,
Oh,
never mind the year or 2 years or 3 years
yes.
and however long down the track. But yeah, definitely a great option for our environment.
So I'll talk you through my process. I do the fold like you. I actually like the tab tucked. So if you're looking at your Hello disc, you can see there's a couple of versions, but there's a little kind of tag on the end that you can use to pull it out. So I fold it in half and insert it like a tampon. I think having practice in the shower, you're right, is so helpful, or adding some lubricant on the end. What you want to be careful of is not accidentally just putting lubricant all over the disc, because then it slips out of your hand and will fall into the toilet if you are doing it over the toilet. But it definitely helps to be a little bit smoother the first time that you have go. What I find I do, and I don't know if this is a thing, but this is what works for me. I almost bear down first, start to insert, and then almost like suck it in.
No, I
Does
think
that
that's
sound familiar?
practice. Yeah. Yes.
I was trying to explain it to somebody in a DM and I was like, well, this is what I do, but I'm not sure that this is
I think
technical language.
shower is such a personal space. You can do whatever you want in there. And it does make it much easier to insert or take out if you're afraid of like blood going everywhere.
Yeah.
Obviously
Let's
with
talk about that. One of the big questions that kind of
yeah.
came up on Instagram was the removal of said disc. I mean, it can be very messy. The first time I emptied the disc, I ended up having to wash my shoes because I was like, oh, I really tipped that everywhere without
Yeah.
realizing, which sounds appalling. But I feel like I've got my technique kind of now. What are your hot tips for mess-free emptying?
I think that's the thing. It's like practice. To perfect anything, we need to practice it, right? It's definitely a great thing to do in the shower because you've got no cleanup after that, and it's back in and you're ready to go for another 8 hours. And that's usually how my period goes. I will get up in the morning, have a shower, empty it, put it back in whilst I'm in the shower, go about my day, and then have an evening shower, and that's how it rolls. Mess free. I have heard that obviously closer to the rim of the disc, you will have more control. So when you loop it closer, put your finger in closer to the rim, you will have more control. But pulling it out slowly is another great option. When you're sitting on the toilet and you're in that position already, just bear in mind that it's going to come out that way. So,
It'll tip at the back when you pull it out.
yeah, just the positioning. Make sure you're in the right position. You're not sitting over the toilet. You're not crouching over it. You've got the right spot.
I find when I tip mine, you can kind of empty it yourself, or like empty it hands-free, the majority of the blood. So by actually kind of bearing down on the toilet, almost like you're doing a poo, you can actually empty a
Yeah, so
fairly big
the
portion of it.
will push it down. So if you're weeing, sometimes it may auto dump. And when you're pooing, it most certainly will have that motion of auto dumping. So you have to be, I guess, mindful that that could happen when you are going to the toilet.
I feel
And you're
like
not
that's a helpful thing though, when you're wanting to empty it anyway, is if you can actually take the bulk of the contents out before you
everything out.
pull the disc out completely, that can help. I also find like I pull it on a slight kind of tilting angle, knowing where I'm trying to tip most of it first in the toilet, and having a piece of toilet paper in your hand, kind of ready to put it on there if you're going to rinse it.
But as you would have noticed, like practice takes it takes practice, right?
Yeah.
And the more you do it, the more you get familiar with it, and it's easy. It's just like the first time you ever tried a tampon. How scary was that? Same thing goes with the disc or the cup.
Talk to me about the kind of changing it or emptying it. How often, like if you're changing it in a public toilet, do you need to rinse it? Do you need to clean it? What do you need to do?
Well, standard practice with a disc, I usually sterilize it before my period and then after my period, and I store it in this case. If you are on the go and say you're at work and lunchtime, you can wipe it out with a tissue, a bit of toilet paper, and it's pretty much fine to go again. We do have other options. We've got the Hello Go sanitizing spray, which quick spray, can spray your hands as well, and obviously the Hello Wash, which isn't going to be everyone's option, especially if you're in a public restroom. So they've said, the Hello Period Company have said that toilet paper is suffice enough.
Yeah. And so I think that's kind of helpful to know that you don't even have to fully have everything off it to put it back in, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Just needs to get you to the next time that you can have your shower,
Yeah,
which I think is a better option still than a tampon. Like you can actually take it out, put it back in the disc, whereas a
absolutely.
tampon, you
And
just can't.
whilst you're talking about that, because there are two colors, and when you do clean your disc, say if you're in a public area, you might have remnants of the blood on this color in particular. And it might not wipe off with a tissue. A lot of people get a little bit freaked out by the staining, and that is why they came up with the option of the black disc. Obviously, you don't see any staining on it, and it obviously depends on our body type and how much iron we actually have in our menstrual blood to determine if you're going to end up staining your disc.
Yeah, interesting.
At the end of the day, no one sees the disc except you or whoever's in your bathroom. But yeah, it's definitely not a concern if your this color in particular decides to stain.
So from a cleaning point of view, the things that you really have to be doing is sterilizing it before you use it, and ideally when your cycle has finished. So when you've stopped using
Yeah.
it for that cycle, and that you can do in the little silicone case that you can buy, so you can microwave it. Do you do 1 minute 30 each side, or do you just do 3 minutes all up?
I do 1 minute 30 each side.
Yeah, I do 1 minute 30, and then I turn it over, remembering that the water will be very hot.
Even my
in the
husband
little...
knows how to do it for me. So
There you go. And you can actually do it on the stovetop if you want to.
you can, yeah.
Putting it in a whisk, is that what you've heard?
Yes, I have. But obviously, this is just
Yeah. The
easier
case is
option.
much easier than
And
using your whisk to sterilize your
you don't
soap.
have odd questions about what's on your stovetop either.
So between the beginning and end of your cycle, you can literally just wipe it down. You can rinse it under water if you want to, or you can just reinsert. So I think the communal areas does freak people out, but knowing that you don't have to go to that kind of level is helpful.
Yeah.
The next question was about discomfort. So should you feel the disc? One person in my DM said it feels harder than a tampon. Should I feel it? And I feel like no, you shouldn't feel a thing. I don't feel a thing.
I don't feel a thing either, but I did go over some of Kim Rose's YouTube videos, Period Nirvana, and she said that it rated a 3.5 out of 5 for firmness. So it is quite firm in comparison to the other discs that she has reviewed. And the reason for this is that it can actually be pushed up into the vaginal canal. So if you don't have that firmness, you can imagine it could be a lot harder to push it up.
It shouldn't be uncomfortable though, should it?
It shouldn't be uncomfortable. There could be other underlying issues. You might need to see a pelvic floor physio or a gynecologist and make sure everything's intact, but it shouldn't hurt at all. No.
I would say I feel it much less than a tampon and much less than the cup.
Yeah, absolutely.
Personally.
I agree.
Yeah. And I think I've actually spoken to a lot of people who have had like a pelvic floor checkup and taken their disc and had some feedback
Yeah,
from their
okay.
pelvic physio, which I think is when you get this working right for you, in terms of the money that you save, in terms of products being used, the
Absolutely.
time, the effort, like, I cannot rave about how much just time this has saved me
Oh,
already. Only been using
absolutely.
it.
And like, yes, they seem expensive to begin with, but when you're like, I remember the first 6 periods that I went through, I was like, oh, I've just saved $5 on tampons here, $5 on pads here. And like, it adds up in the long run. And in this cost of living crisis that we're going through, it's a big saving to the shopping bill at the end of the day. Like, I went down the tampon section the other day and I was gobsmacked about how much they actually cost.
Yeah,
And
interesting. And some councils are doing a rebate on reusable menstrual
yes, yes.
products,
So
which is
I think it's
awesome.
up to most of them have the opportunity for you to claim your 50% of your receipt back up to $100. So I know that my council has yet to put that in.
Keep petitioning.
Oh, don't worry, I am. But yeah, it's definitely something to look into. So if you're buying $100 worth of period products, you'll get $50 back.
Yeah, and when you look at a $50 outlay, like that's pretty easy to make up once it's working for you. What
Absolutely.
about next question is around position. How do I know it's in the right spot? And I think this is something I definitely struggled with at first. I was emptying mine quite regularly because I don't know if it's, in position. What's the kind of best tip for knowing it's in the right spot?
It definitely requires a lot more intimacy than a cup or a tampon. And you definitely have to push it up until I guess you can't feel it anymore. And that's why the tabs are there. So you can grab onto that to remove it when you need to. Uh, what do you think?
I think the thing that when I can't feel it, I think is the key. Like that feels
Yeah,
comfortable and
that's
not
exactly, yeah. When I can't feel
pushing.
it more, I know it's in place. It
And
just
I think
literally pops open.
the bit that I didn't quite get my head around the first cycle was that you almost have to insert and then push that last bit kind of up and behind your pubic bone,
Yes.
which felt like I feel like I had to do a bit of anatomy revision at that
Yeah.
point when it said behind your pubic bone. But you're basically kind of going in and then up so that it kind of sits in place and it's held in place
Well, the
by that part
menstrual
of the bone.
blood kind of, it almost is like a running tap, and this is the basin. And that's how I try and explain it to people. And it will, it just drips, drips. It might drip heavier than other times, but yeah, the tap and the basin. And if you
Interesting.
have a look through the diagrams, you will understand what I mean by the tap and the basin.
Yeah. Lots of questions about leakage, and I think there have been like so many messages from people who have said like this is a life changer, like seriously. But then there are absolutely people who haven't found that right fit with it. Are you pretty confident that like most people can find a leak-free option with the disc?
Most people love it because it is leak proof. If you're not experiencing that, I would suggest that you review your positioning, or once again visit a pelvic floor or physio or a gynecologist, because it may not be the right fit for you. Even though it's one size fits all, you might be the one out of 100 that it doesn't fit.
As a person with a big head, I hate the term one size fits all because I used to try these hats that were
Yeah.
one size fits all. Does not fit
Never
all.
works
This
with
is
a beanie.
unfair. Um, what are the things that will make it leak? So the fit, so obviously like the way you've kind of inserted it potentially.
Yes.
Talk to me about the kind of
Uh,
coughing, the pelvic floor muscles, that kind of
yeah,
thing.
exactly. Like we talked about the auto dumping earlier, it may be the position that you're in, or your muscles might be contracting in a way that's pushing it out. yeah, just I
Should
guess
it fall out ever?
it should never fall out. That's the time to be going to see
Yeah.
someone about your pelvic floor health.
What if the disc gets quite full? Will it start to leak then?
I've had one experience with this, only because I left it in for much longer than I should have. I think it might have been about 15 or 16 hours because I forgot that I was on my period. That it happens when this disc is in, I don't feel like I'm on my period. Besides the cramps and all of that, I
I
can't.
think it's helped my cramps. It has significantly. I don't get that like heavy, weighted kind of feeling anymore that I got when I was just wearing the knickers or a cup. Like it's very different for me.
And I notice that my periods are shorter.
Yes, same.
You notice yours are shorter? Yeah, I think it's just because everything's kind of free to
Yeah,
bleed. Yes.
wild. So if you're having, I mean, I find I have quite a heavy flow, and I find that on the first kind of like the worst day, probably day two, I'm more aware of emptying it. And I have had a sensation where I can feel like, oh, and it feels kind of damper than it should. And I've noticed like I've had a really kind of heavy period. It doesn't though, like I personally haven't experienced where like it's leaked more than it would leak if you were, had a tampon that was full,
Yes. Yeah.
that kind of gradual overflow. And so I mean, what am I? Probably 8 months into using it. I still like to wear the light period knickers just for peace of mind.
You,
Not as
you,
not as excited as
you'll
you
go
just now.
solo soon, I promise.
I think it's more in my head, and I
Yeah,
quite
well, it's
like it.
like literally ingrained into us that we need to have something soaking it up all the time. But
Absolutely. A couple of people asked about, I feel like my wee is restricted when I'm wearing it. Is that a thing that should happen?
I haven't heard of that one before, but it could be that the disc is not actually pushed up high enough, because if it was pushed up high enough, it wouldn't have anything to do with your wing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm thinking the more I think about this, the more questions I personally have for a
No,
pelvic
don't worry.
physio.
I
So,
get a million questions a day, and I feel like, oh my God, I didn't even think of that.
what if they've bought the disc, gone to the pelvic physio for whatever reason this doesn't work? What's the best alternative?
Well, there's always period reusable briefs now. You've got the reusable pads. I'm not too sure about the old tampon train at the moment with the recent news of metals in tampons. They made a big discovery, if you had a
Give
caught
us a short. What was
news.
the message?
They tested 14 brands of tampons in the US, and there were traces of arsenic and lead in both organic and non-organic tampons. And obviously, it's a field that not a lot of research has been done in, and hopefully this is just a push to find out more. And as I tell everyone, read, research.
Isn't it to make sense of to know all of
It
the things?
is, especially when we're not all medically trained to understand what all these terms mean. And we just want what's best for our body, and we want to be putting the right things into our body.
Yeah. It's interesting. I always take them with a bit of grain of salt because I feel like the headlines that make the news are ones that kind of are designed to scare you.
Oh,
And,
absolutely.
everyone's, I'm sure, yeah, it's an interesting one that I wonder if we'll hear a bit more about.
Yeah,
But in the
oh,
meantime, even just,
definitely. There's so many clickbait headlines that you would have seen popping around, but at the moment, all we know is that we have to learn more and find out more about, yeah, what's going into our body.
yeah, I love it. So the take-home message is I love the disc. I think most people love the disc. There are definitely a number of people who have had their individual challenges with it and maybe worth chatting to a physiotherapist who specializes in women's health. And maybe if that's an interest of people, I can grab one of my friends onto the podcast. We can talk through some of the common challenges that women face. But if in the worst case, it's like a chance to check in about your pelvic health, right?
I think thing, and our bodies change so much. Like, especially I know for me, after having 3 babies, 2 at once, I found like my period changed dramatically. So it was important for me to revisit the gynecologist and go, is this normal? Why are my periods so heavy? Like, it's a nice little reminder to check in about your own health as well.
Never a bad thing to do that, is it? Thank you, Beck, for your feedback and your advice around using the disc and all the other products. I will link to Beck's website and her services in the show notes. I will link you to my discount code in the show notes as well. And I wonder if people have specific questions, maybe they can send you a DM on Instagram or an email through the
Absolutely.
website.
More than happy to answer any questions.
And I'll link to Period Nirvana and her videos in the show notes as well. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
A huge thanks for tuning in and listening to my podcast. This is all brand new for me, so I'd love to hear your feedback. Give me a review or send me a DM. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And above all, I'd really love you to hit that subscribe button to keep listening. Thanks.